Hello, enthusiasts of thrilling stories and captivating mysteries. Before we immerse ourselves in the darkness of one of America's most shocking cases, I'd like to invite you to do something small but profoundly meaningful to us. If you are fascinated by true crime narratives, intense investigations, and the hidden corners of the human psyche, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support is our motivation to continue delivering quality, insightful, and compelling content like the story you are about to hear. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and brace yourself. Because today, we are diving deep into a story that will make you ponder. A tale of terror, loss, and the relentless hunt for a killer who shook a nation. This isn't just a story. It's a journey into the heart of darkness, and you'll want to stay with us until the very end. Now let's begin. The city of Ravenwood, Oregon, had always prided itself on its unique blend of Pacific Northwest charm and burgeoning tech-era ambition. Nestled between the lush, mist-shrouded foothills of the Cascades and the shimmering expanse of the Columbia River, it was a place where rain was a constant companion, where independent coffee shops thrived, and where the murmur of innovation often overshadowed the quiet hum of everyday life. Its downtown core, a mix of historic brick buildings and sleek, modern glass towers, pulsed with a youthful energy, while its residential districts, sprawling outwards like veins from a heart, offered a tranquil suburban existence. It was, by all accounts, a good place to live, a city that felt safe, a community that felt connected. That perception shattered on a cold, pre-dawn morning in late October. The kind of morning where the mist clung to the streetlights, turning their glow into spectral halos, and the air carried the crisp scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose weary eyes had seen too much human cruelty over his 27 years on the force, received the call at 4:17 a.m. A patrol officer, his voice tight with a mixture of shock and unease, reported a body found in Forest Park, a sprawling urban wilderness that was Ravenwood's green lung. Not just a body, the officer had stressed, but a scene. A meticulously arranged, deeply disturbing scene. Corbin, a creature of habit, had already been awake, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and staring out at the rain-streaked window of his modest apartment. His wife, Sarah, a vibrant artist whose laughter used to fill their home, had been gone for 3 years, a quiet cancer having stolen her away, leaving an echoing silence that the early morning hours made particularly acute. He dressed mechanically, the familiar weight of his service weapon on his hip a comfort, a reminder of the purpose that still anchored him. When he arrived at the crime scene, the pale glow of emergency lights cut through the persistent fog, illuminating a tableau that instantly coiled a knot of ice in his stomach. The victim was a woman, mid-30s, dressed in what appeared to be professional attire. Her name, he would later learn, was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant young astrophysicist at the local university. She lay on a bed of vibrant autumn leaves, her arms crossed over her chest, a single, perfectly preserved black raven feather placed delicately on her lips. Her eyes, wide and vacant, stared up at the perpetually gray sky, reflecting nothing but the mist. There was no visible struggle, no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds. The cause of death appeared to be a single, precise stab wound to the heart, so clean, so efficient. It spoke of a chilling expertise. Detective Corbin, Detective Elena Ramirez, greeted him, her voice a low murmur. Her usually sharp, analytical gaze was clouded with a nascent horror. Ramirez, barely into her 30s, was Corbin's junior partner, a rising star in the RPD, whose keen intellect and relentless drive were a stark contrast to Corbin's world-weary pragmatism. They were an unlikely pair, but their differences had forged an effective synergy. "What do we have, Elena?" Corbin asked, his voice gravelly. He surveyed the scene, taking in the perimeter established by the patrol officers, the quiet efficiency of the forensic team already meticulously documenting every detail. "Evelyn Reed, Dr." Ramirez supplied, consulting her notepad. "Lives alone or did? No history of trouble. Neighbors say she kept to herself, brilliant but a bit eccentric. Last seen leaving a late-night lecture at the university's physics department around 11 p.m. Found by a jogger at 4 a.m. She paused, her breath misting in the cold air. The feather, Miles. Deliberate. Corbin knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb anything. The feather, impossibly dark against the pallor of her skin, seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. It wasn't just placed. It felt presented. This wasn't a crime of passion, nor a random act of violence. This was something else. Something colder, more calculated. "No purse, no phone?" he asked, his gaze sweeping the immediate vicinity. "Her handbag was found a few yards away. Intact," Ramirez replied, pointing to an evidence bag. "Phone, wallet, keys all there. Nothing stolen. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong." Corbin stood, his joints creaking. "Then what was it?" The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. The silence that followed was punctuated only by the rhythmic click of forensic cameras and the distant wail of a passing ambulance, a sound that, for the first time, felt like a harbinger of ill omen in Ravenwood. The first 72 hours of the investigation were a blur of caffeine-fueled exhaustion and mounting frustration. The forensics team, led by the meticulous Dr. Anya Sharma, found no fingerprints on the body or the feather, no DNA evidence that wasn't Evelyn's. The only unique signature was the precise nature of the wound and, of course, the raven feather. Sharma theorized the killer had used gloves, and the feather itself seemed to have been handled with extreme care, suggesting it was brought to the scene, not found there. "It's almost surgical, Miles," Sharma had explained, her voice hushed, as she showed him the autopsy report. The blade was incredibly sharp, narrow, and precise, straight into the heart, no hesitation. The killer knew exactly what they were doing, and they wanted it quick, clean. The lack of any obvious motive gnawed at Corbin. No forced entry, no sexual assault, no theft. Evelyn Reed was not known to have enemies. She led a quiet, academic life. The randomness was terrifying. It implied anyone could be next. The media, initially restrained, began to circle like vultures. The Ravenwood Chronicle ran a cautious headline: "Tragedy strikes Forest Park. Local scientist found dead." But beneath the surface, a tremor of unease was spreading. People talked in hushed tones at coffee shops, their eyes darting towards the newsstands. The comfortable illusion of safety began to fray. Just as the city was starting to process the shock of Evelyn Reed's murder, a second body was discovered. This time, it was Martha Jenkins, a beloved retired librarian, found in her small, meticulously kept garden in the quiet Cedar Creek neighborhood. The scene was eerily similar. No forced entry into her home, no signs of struggle, a single, precise stab wound to the heart, and the chilling signature, another black raven feather, placed on her lips. Corbin felt a cold dread seep into his bones. Two victims, seemingly unconnected. One a young, brilliant academic, the other an elderly, respected member of the community. Both meticulously murdered, both left with the same macabre token. This wasn't random anymore. This was a pattern, a terrifying, emerging pattern. "Two feathers," Ramirez said, her voice strained, as they stood over Martha Jenkins' body. The autumn sun, a rare guest these days, cast long, distorted shadows across the garden. "He's sending a message, Miles." "But what the hell is it?" Captain David Miller, a gruff but fair man who had overseen Corbin's career for 2 decades, called them into his office, his face grim. "The mayor's breathing down my neck. The press is going wild. 2 murders in less than a week, no leads, no suspects. We need something, anything." Corbin ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "We're pushing every angle, Captain. VICAP, geographical profiling, social circles. But there's nothing connecting these 2 women. No shared acquaintances, no common haunts." Evelyn frequented academic circles. Martha was active in her church and local book clubs. Ramirez chimed in, pointing to a large map of Ravenwood pinned to the wall, with red markers indicating the crime scenes. The locations are disparate too. Forest Park is north of downtown. Cedar Creek is a residential area in the southeast. No clear geographical pattern. No obvious escape routes. "What about the feather?" Miller pressed. "Still nothing, sir," Corbin replied. Dr. Sharma's team is analyzing the species' potential origin. It's a common raven feather, Corvus corax. But that doesn't help us narrow down much. It could come from anywhere. The press had, by now, christened the killer the Ravenwood Ripper. Some sensationalist tabloids screamed. The feathered fiend, others mused. But it was the nocturne killer that stuck, capturing the dark, silent nature of the crimes, the chill of night, the unsettling melody of fear that had begun to play across the city. The name felt apt, reflecting the precise, almost artistic presentation of his victims. Fear, once a distant concept, became palpable in Ravenwood. The vibrant nightlife that characterized the downtown core began to wither. Restaurants and bars, usually bustling until the early hours, emptied out by 9. Women, particularly, walked with a new vigilance, their keys clutched between their fingers, their eyes scanning every shadow. Sales of home security systems skyrocketed. Neighborhood watch groups, once sleepy community initiatives, sprang to life, their members patrolling streets with a fierce, almost desperate determination. Corbin felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. The fear of the city, the demands of the captain, the ghost of Sarah's absence haunting his quiet evenings. He found himself working longer hours, driven by a relentless need to bring peace back to Ravenwood, to silence the unsettling nocturne that had gripped its soul. He reviewed case files late into the night, the flickering screen illuminating his tired face. Ramirez, equally dedicated, often stayed with him, her youthful energy slowly giving way to the same kind of bone-deep fatigue that characterized her older partner. "Miles, look at this," Ramirez said one evening, pushing a thick binder across the desk. It was a preliminary psychological profile compiled by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, who had been brought in to assist. Corbin scanned the document, his lips forming a thin line. Highly intelligent, organized, possesses a profound sense of control. Ritualistic behavior, possibly driven by a narcissistic need for recognition or a deep-seated grievance. Targets chosen for symbolic reasons, not personal ones. The lack of struggle indicates either surprise, intimidation, or a profound lack of empathy from the victim, perhaps even trust. Or a combination of all three. Or a killer who is incredibly good at what he does, Ramirez added, her voice low. The report suggests the feather is not just a signature, but a taunt, a challenge. Corbin remembered the stillness of Evelyn Reed's eyes, the placid expression on Martha Jenkins' face. There was no terror there, no last-moment struggle, just repose. It was unsettling. It suggested a killer who could approach his victims without alarming them, someone who might even be perceived as harmless or even trustworthy in those fatal moments. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The nocturne killer wasn't just a ghost in the night. He was someone who moved among them, unseen, unheard, until it was too late. He was the friendly stranger, the helpful neighbor, the unassuming passerby. And in Ravenwood, a city that had prided itself on its warmth and openness, that realization was perhaps the most terrifying of all. As October bled into November, the rain intensified, mirroring the somber mood of the city. The trees shed their last leaves, leaving behind skeletal branches that clawed at the gray sky. And in this bleak landscape, the nocturne killer struck again. This time, the victim was Tommy Albright, a vibrant young bartender known for his infectious laugh and eclectic music taste. He was found in the alley behind the Velvet Lounge, a popular downtown bar where he had worked for years, on his way home after closing. The discovery sent a new wave of shock through the city. This was a public space, albeit deserted in the late hours. The MO was chillingly consistent. The precise stab wound, the absence of other injuries, the black raven feather. Tommy Albright's death hit the community harder. Evelyn and Martha were relatively isolated. Tommy was a social butterfly, beloved by many. His murder felt like a personal affront to the city's spirit. Vigils were held. Protests erupted, demanding answers, demanding justice. The pressure on Captain Miller, and by extension Corbin and Ramirez, became unbearable. "We are mobilizing every available officer," Captain Miller announced at a tense press conference, his voice tight with barely suppressed frustration. "We are working tirelessly, around the clock. We will find this monster." His words, meant to reassure, sounded hollow even to his own ears. Corbin watched the footage of the press conference later, his reflection superimposed over Miller's grim face on the screen. He saw the doubt in the public's eyes, the fear in their hushed questions. He understood it. They had no leads, no credible witnesses, no useful forensics beyond the weapon analysis and the feather. It was like chasing smoke. Ramirez, sitting opposite him, tossed a crumpled energy drink can into the overflowing wastebasket. 3 victims, Miles. A woman of science, an elderly librarian, a young bartender. No common threads except the killer's signature. "There has to be something," Corbin insisted, running his hands through his hair. "A connection. Pattern we're missing. Can't be truly random. No killer is truly random. There's always a reason, always a motive, even if it's twisted beyond our comprehension." They spread out the victim profiles, pictures, and maps across the large conference table. A macabre collage of lives brutally cut short. Evelyn Reed, age 36, astrophysicist, found in Forest Park. Lived in a modern condo near the university. Last seen 11 p.m. Martha Jenkins, age 78, retired librarian. Found in her garden. Lived in a small bungalow in Cedar Creek. Last seen 9 p.m. Tommy Albright, age 28, bartender. Found in a downtown alley. Lived in a shared apartment above a bookshop. Last seen 3 a.m. Corbin picked up a pen and started circling keywords, drawing lines between them, searching for an invisible thread. Forest Park is tranquil, secluded. Cedar Creek, a quiet residential street. The alley, a dark, hidden space off a busy downtown street. All places of vulnerability, places where someone might be alone, unobserved, in the late hours. They were all alone, yes, Ramirez confirmed. But their routines were so different, their lives so disparate. What does he get from this? What's the motive for a killer who takes nothing, leaves only a feather, and attacks such varied targets? They considered the weapon again. Dr. Sharma's analysis had provided a profile. A single-edged blade, approximately 5 to 6 inches long, very narrow, incredibly sharp. Possibly a hunting knife or a specially crafted blade. No unique markings. Could be any number of commercially available knives. The sheer meticulousness of the killer was unnerving. The lack of struggle, the precise placement of the feather, the absence of forensic traces, it all spoke of an individual who was not only highly organized but also deeply detached, almost clinical in their acts. It suggested a level of planning and execution that was beyond the typical serial killer, who often made mistakes in their haste or emotional turmoil. Corbin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. This guy isn't just killing people, Elena. He's erasing them. Erasing their last moments of fear, their attempts to fight back. He's taking away their humanity and replacing it with his own dark signature. He closed his eyes, picturing the scenes, trying to inhabit the killer's mind. What would drive someone to such cold, calculated violence? What was the meaning of the raven feather? Was it a symbol of death, of darkness, of freedom, of solitude? Ravens were intelligent birds, observers, sometimes seen as messengers between worlds. Was the killer trying to communicate something? Or was it simply an aesthetic choice, a twisted form of artistic expression? The city's fear was now morphing into anger. Calls for the mayor to resign grew louder. News crews from national networks descended on Ravenwood, turning the local tragedy into a national sensation. The RPD was under immense pressure, and Corbin felt the strain in every bone, every aching muscle. He felt Sarah's absence acutely now, the lack of her calming presence, her quiet strength. He missed the way she used to ground him, to remind him there was a world beyond the darkness he routinely faced. One evening, after another fruitless day of chasing shadows, Corbin found himself in his apartment, the silence heavier than usual. He opened a bottle of cheap whiskey, a habit he had picked up after Sarah's death, and stared at the flickering news report on his television. A psychologist, brought in by a news channel, was pontificating about the killer's profile, using words like sadistic, megalomaniac, and narcissist. Corbin scoffed. These armchair analyses, while perhaps rooted in some truth, felt utterly useless when faced with the cold, hard reality of an empty lead sheet. He pulled out the official profile report again. Profound sense of control, ritualistic behavior, targets chosen for symbolic reasons. What symbol? What connected an astrophysicist, a librarian, and a bartender? All three had routines that placed them alone at night. All three were going about their lives, unsuspecting, until the nocturne killer entered their orbit. Corbin looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. The city was quiet, save for the incessant drumming of rain against his window. He imagined the killer out there, somewhere, perhaps watching the news, reveling in the chaos he had sown. Or perhaps already planning his next move, his next victim. He picked up the phone, dialing Ramirez. "Hey, it's Miles. Still awake?" "Barely," she replied, her voice husky with sleep and exhaustion. "What's up?" "I'm looking at the profiles again. The common thread isn't who they were, but what they represented." Corbin mused aloud, his mind racing. Evelyn Reed, the pursuit of knowledge, looking to the stars. Martha Jenkins, the guardian of stories, the keeper of history. Tommy Albright, the heart of human connection, the social fabric. What if the killer isn't targeting individuals but concepts? The pillars of a functioning society. A long silence stretched across the line. Then, Ramirez's voice, now fully awake, cut through the quiet. "Miles, that's a stretch. That's abstract. We're dealing with a human being, not a philosophy professor." I know, Corbin conceded. "But we're so focused on the how and the who they were, we're missing the why he chose them. If it's not personal, then it's symbolic. And what is more symbolic than taking away the very things that make a community thrive? Knowledge, history, human connection." Ramirez mulled it over. "So, he's attacking the soul of Ravenwood?" "Perhaps," Corbin said, a new current of thought sparking in his mind. "Or perhaps he feels he was deprived of those things. Overlooked, unseen. What if the feather isn't just a taunt, but a mark? A declaration that he is the one who sees, he is the one who chooses." The conversation ended without a concrete breakthrough, but a seed had been planted in Corbin's mind. A flicker of an idea, a dark hypothesis about the killer's warped perception of the world. He understood the skepticism, but the sheer lack of tangible leads forced them to consider the intangible, the psychological underpinnings of such horrific acts. He spent the rest of the night poring over the cases again, not just the facts, but the narratives. The quiet life of a scientist exploring the cosmos, the serene existence of a woman surrounded by books, the vibrant social pulse of a young man behind a bar. All disrupted, all silenced, all marked by the same dark feather. The nocturne killer had transformed Ravenwood. It was no longer a city of quiet charm. It was a city of whispers, of locked doors, of wary glances. It was a city holding its breath, waiting for the next whisper of dread, the next chilling melody from the darkness. And Miles Corbin knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had to stop it before the nocturne consumed them all. He just didn't know how yet, but he would keep looking, keep digging, until he found the dissonance that would expose the monster hiding in the shadows. The third murder, that of Tommy Albright, had irrevocably altered Ravenwood's psychological landscape. The initial shock had curdled into a pervasive, chilling fear. No longer was it just the vulnerable or those with late-night routines who felt exposed. The nocturne killer had breached the social fabric, striking at the heart of the community's shared spaces. The downtown district, once a vibrant hub, now felt like a stage for unseen horrors after dark. Corbin and Ramirez, along with the entire RPD homicide division, were operating on fumes. Sleep had become a luxury, meals an afterthought. The precinct buzzes with a constant, low-frequency hum of frantic activity, punctuated by the sharp rings of phones and the urgent voices of detectives. Whiteboards filled with theories, suspect lists, and timelines covered every available wall space, a labyrinth of interconnected, yet frustratingly incomplete, information. "We've expanded the geographical profiling," Ramirez reported to Corbin, gesturing towards a map of Ravenwood now dotted with various markers indicating not just crime scenes, but also potential safe houses, travel routes, and points of interest for the killer. The latest FBI behavioral report suggests the killer likely resides or works within a 3 to 5 mile radius of at least one of the crime scenes. Given their disparate locations, it means he could live almost anywhere. Or he's deliberately scattering the locations to mislead us, Corbin grumbled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The perpetual caffeine headache was a dull throb behind his eyes. "He's smart, Elena. Too smart. Too clean." The absence of forensic evidence remained the most infuriating aspect of the case. Dr. Sharma's team had tried every cutting-edge technique, every new advancement in trace analysis. But the results were always the same. Nothing. No DNA, no fingerprints, no fibers, no shoe prints. It was as if the killer was a ghost, leaving behind only the chilling tableau of death and his signature feather. The feathers themselves had been subjected to intense scrutiny. Dr. Sharma had confirmed they were indeed from common ravens, perfectly preserved, suggesting they were either carefully collected or even purchased. "There's no trace of human skin cells, no animal blood, no particulate matter," Sharma had explained, her brow furrowed. "It's like they were cleaned with surgical precision before being placed." This detail, rather than providing a lead, only deepened the mystery and intensified the image of a meticulous, almost obsessive killer. Public pressure intensified with each passing day. Rebecca Thorne, an ambitious and relentless journalist for the Ravenwood Chronicle, became the public's voice, her articles a mix of raw grief and pointed questions for the police. Her daily columns, "The Silence of the Ravens," detailed the city's descent into paranoia, meticulously cataloging every unanswered question and every missed opportunity. "They're losing faith, Miles," Captain Miller said, his face etched with worry, during a particularly fraught strategy meeting. "The city's bleeding. Businesses are hurting. People are moving out. We need a break, and we need it now." The meeting included representatives from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, specifically SSA Dr. Eris Thorne, a renowned criminal psychologist whose calm demeanor belied a piercing intellect. Dr. Thorne had presented an updated profile. "The killer exhibits classic signs of an organized, visionary, or mission-oriented serial offender," he explained, his voice even and measured. "The ritualistic elements, the precise wound, the feather, the lack of struggle, the symbolic nature of the victim selection, however abstract, all point to a deep-seated pathology. This isn't about rage. It's about control. It's about a warped sense of order. He wants to be seen, but he also wants to be untouchable." Corbin interrupted. "But why these specific victims? An astrophysicist, a librarian, a bartender. What's the mission?" Dr. Thorne paused, his gaze thoughtful. "That's the enigma. It could be deeply personal, a symbolic attack on aspects of society the killer feels has wronged him, or that he views as corrupt. Or it could be a progression, a selection based on internal criteria known only to him. He's telling a story, but we don't have the key to his language." Ramirez interjected. "We've looked into every possible connection. Shared schools, workplaces, social media, dating apps, family histories. Nothing. They are truly disparate on paper. Perhaps the connection isn't external, but internal to the killer," Dr. Thorne suggested. "He perceives a link, even if it's a delusion. For example, he might see Evelyn Reed as symbolizing cold, unfeeling intellect, Martha Jenkins as outdated tradition, and Tommy Albright as frivolous indulgence. He might be cleaning the slate, removing what he sees as impurities or threats to his distorted worldview." The idea, while abstract, resonated with Corbin's earlier theory. It was a bleak, chilling possibility. A killer who wasn't just targeting individuals, but the very essence of human values, judged and condemned by his own sick morality. The days blurred into weeks. The rain continued its relentless assault, mirroring the emotional storm raging within Ravenwood. Schools implemented stricter security. Parents walked their children to and from school, their faces grim. The city's once vibrant parks lay empty, their autumn colors muted by the constant dampness. Corbin found himself increasingly isolated. His conversations revolved solely around the case. He ate, breathed, and slept the nocturne killer. Sarah's ghost, usually a comforting presence in his quiet moments, now felt like another victim, another loss exacerbated by the current nightmare. He saw a doctor for his sleeplessness, receiving a prescription he rarely took, preferring to ride the waves of exhaustion, hoping a breakthrough would come in a fit of lucidity. Ramirez, too, was showing the strain. Her usual sharp wit was dulled, replaced by a grim determination. She argued more with her boyfriend, a paramedic who saw the same horrors from a different angle, but was frustrated by her inability to disconnect. Their relationship was fraying under the immense pressure. One late night, after reviewing surveillance footage of downtown for the 100th time, grainy, inconclusive clips of Tommy Albright's last known movements, Ramirez spotted something. "Miles, look at this. 2:47 a.m. Alley entrance. See that?" Corbin squinted at the screen. A dark figure, indistinct, barely a shadow, emerged from the alley just minutes after Tommy Albright would have entered. It was too far, too blurry to identify, but the figure paused, looked back into the alley for a brief moment, then melted into the street's darkness. "It's nothing, Elena," Corbin said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Could be anyone. A homeless person. Another bar worker." "But they lingered," Ramirez insisted, zooming in, the image pixelating further. "Just for a second. Almost like they were admiring their work, or making sure no one saw." They spent the next several days meticulously cross-referencing every bit of surveillance footage from the vicinity of all three crime scenes. Nothing for Evelyn Reed or Martha Jenkins, their locations were less covered by cameras. But for Tommy Albright, the downtown had a denser network. They found similar, fleeting glimpses of a dark figure, always indistinct, always moving with an almost unnatural stealth, disappearing before anyone could get a clear view. It was a phantom, moving through the city's unlit veins. This small, almost imperceptible detail gave them a new focal point. The killer's movements, his apparent comfort in the urban landscape after dark. They brought in a specialized team for spatial analysis, hoping to build a more comprehensive picture of the killer's movement patterns, a ghost map of his presence. The city, meanwhile, was slowly buckling. Schools were seeing increased absenteeism. Businesses, particularly those relying on evening foot traffic, announced closures or significantly reduced hours. The once bustling farmers' market, a staple of Ravenwood, saw sparse attendance, its vibrant stalls now quiet and forlorn. The city was a shell of its former self, its spirit dimmed, its laughter muted. Then came the fourth victim. It was a cold, blustery morning in mid-November. The victim was Dr. Adam Finch, a respected child psychologist and a prominent advocate for mental health awareness. He was found in his home office, a cozy room overlooking his backyard, meticulously arranged with a half-empty cup of tea on his desk and a book lying open. The window was slightly ajar, but no signs of forced entry. The same precise stab wound, the same perfectly preserved black raven feather on his lips. This time, the city's reaction wasn't just fear or anger. It was a profound despair. A child psychologist, a man who dedicated his life to healing the most vulnerable, had been targeted. The very notion of safety, of protection, crumbled. The message, however abstract, seemed to be intensifying. The killer was systematically dismantling the moral and intellectual framework of Ravenwood. Knowledge, history, connection, and now, healing, Corbin murmured, staring at Dr. Finch's serene, lifeless face. "He's taking away the very things that make us human, Elena. The things that bind us." Ramirez's eyes were bleak. "And he's doing it with such contempt. It's not just murder, it's desecration." The FBI team, now fully embedded in the RPD, worked tirelessly. Dr. Thorne updated his profile. The killer is escalating, not in brutality, but in his choice of victims. He's targeting individuals who represent core societal functions, core values. This points to a deeper, more profound grievance against society itself. He feels he has been wronged, unseen, unheard, and he is now forcing society to see him, to hear him, through terror. A frantic and desperate new approach was decided upon. A citywide campaign was launched, urging residents to report anything, no matter how insignificant. A new hotline was set up, manned by trained professionals, not just for tips, but for psychological support. The mayor authorized a substantial reward for information leading to the killer's arrest. The hope was to overwhelm the killer, to force a mistake, to find the tiny flaw in his meticulous armor. Corbin felt the pressure like a physical weight on his chest. He was having vivid nightmares now, dreams of faceless figures in the rain, of silent feathers descending, of Sarah's face morphing into the vacant stare of a victim. He knew he was close to breaking, but the sheer urgency of the case, the desperate need to stop this monster, kept him going. One evening, Rebecca Thorne, the journalist, approached Corbin outside the precinct, her face drawn but her eyes still burning with a professional fire. "Detective, the people of Ravenwood need more than platitudes. They need answers. Is there any progress? Anything at all?" Corbin looked at her, seeing not just a journalist, but a reflection of the city's raw pain. He knew she wasn't trying to sensationalize for the sake of it. She genuinely cared. "We're working, Miss Thorne. Every lead, every angle. We understand the fear. We feel it too." The psychological profiler, Dr. Thorne, mentioned a grievance against society. "Can you elaborate on that?" she pressed, her recorder discreetly held in her hand. Corbin hesitated, then decided a measured dose of truth might actually help, might awaken someone who held a missing piece of the puzzle. The current theory is that the killer feels profoundly disenfranchised, overlooked. He's taking what he perceives as society's pillars: knowledge, compassion, stability, even joy, and extinguishing them. It's a twisted act of vengeance, a cry for recognition from someone who feels invisible. Rebecca Thorne's eyes widened slightly. Invisible. So he's not just killing. He's trying to be seen. "That's the prevailing theory," Corbin confirmed. "He wants to command attention, to instill fear, to show us that he holds the power over what we value most. The feathers are his calling card, his declaration of presence." The article Rebecca Thorne wrote the next day, titled "The Invisible Hand of Terror: Why the Nocturne Killer Targets Our Soul," was devastatingly insightful. It laid bare the emotional and psychological toll on Ravenwood, and subtly shifted the focus from the who to the why, encouraging readers to consider who among them might harbor such a profound, festering resentment. The article sparked a flurry of calls to the hotline. Most were dead ends, fueled by paranoia or personal grudges. But one call stood out. It came from an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, who lived near Forest Park. She described a young man, quiet, unassuming, who used to feed the ravens in the park every morning, rain or shine. He would talk to them, sometimes for hours, his voice a low murmur. She hadn't seen him since the first murder. Corbin and Ramirez drove to Mrs. Henderson's house immediately. She was frail but lucid, her memory sharp. "He was always polite, detective," she explained, offering them tea. "Never caused trouble. But he was different, distant, like he was living in his own world. He collected the feathers, too. Said they were gifts from the birds, tokens of understanding." "Did you ever get his name?" Ramirez asked, her heart pounding. "No, dear. Never exchanged names. Just a nod, a brief hello. But I remember his face. Thin, pale, intense eyes. And he always wore a dark hooded jacket, even when it wasn't raining." She then pointed to a rough sketch she had made, a surprisingly accurate depiction of a gaunt young man with piercing, almost hollow eyes. This was it. Not a direct link to the murders, but a crucial piece of the puzzle. A man obsessed with ravens, who collected feathers, who was last seen near the first crime scene, and who fit the general, vague description of the shadowy figure in the surveillance footage. A man who felt unseen, yet had a profound connection with the dark, intelligent birds that symbolized his monstrous acts. Corbin felt a surge of adrenaline, cutting through the fatigue. "Mrs. Henderson, you may have just given us our first real lead." They left her house, the rain still falling, but now it felt different. Not oppressive, but cleansing. The shadow of the nocturne killer was still vast, but a sliver of light had finally penetrated. They had a face, however vague, and a potential thread to pull. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, Miles Corbin felt a glimmer of hope. The nocturne killer might be smart, he might be meticulous, but he had left a whisper behind. A whisper of a quiet man, a man who talked to ravens, a man who, perhaps, felt too deeply connected to their dark symbolism. And that whisper, Corbin knew, could be his undoing. The silence of the night might still hold terror, but the search was finally, truly on. The sketch provided by Mrs. Henderson, combined with the fragmented surveillance footage, gave the RPD its first concrete image of a potential suspect. It wasn't a clear picture, but it was enough to work with. The face, thin and angular with intense, deep-set eyes, was plastered across internal bulletins. A new task force, spearheaded by Corbin and Ramirez, was formed, its sole mission to identify the man who talks to ravens. They meticulously cross-referenced the sketch with missing persons reports, individuals with known psychological issues, and anyone who had been observed frequently in Forest Park or other green spaces in the city. The breakthrough came not from a database, but from a keen-eyed patrol officer. Officer David Chun, a relatively new recruit, recognized the face from a recent domestic disturbance call. A quiet, withdrawn young man named Elias Thorne, who lived with his ailing grandmother in a small, isolated house on the outskirts of Ravenwood, not far from the Cedar Creek neighborhood where Martha Jenkins was killed. Elias Thorne. The name sent a chill down Corbin's spine. The psychological profiler from the FBI was SSA Dr. Eris Thorne. A coincidence? Or something more? He quickly dismissed it as irrelevant. Elias was a common enough name, and Thorne was a prominent enough family in the region. The domestic disturbance call had been minor. Elias, agitated and withdrawn, had lashed out verbally at his grandmother, who, out of concern, had called the police. No physical harm, no charges filed, but the incident report painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual, prone to fits of quiet rage, obsessed with order and precision. He had a history of social isolation, having dropped out of college after a single semester, and held a series of menial, solitary jobs: a night watchman at an abandoned factory, a cleaner for a late-night office building. He fit the profile of someone overlooked, someone living on the fringes. Corbin felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. This was it. This was their ghost. A full surveillance operation was immediately put into motion. Elias Thorne's unassuming house became the focal point of a covert network of cameras and undercover officers. The team watched him for 72 agonizing hours. He lived a solitary existence. He left his house only for groceries, brief walks, or his part-time cleaning job at an old municipal building downtown, a job that provided him access to the very areas where Tommy Albright was murdered and where the mysterious figure was seen in surveillance. During one of his walks, they observed him heading towards a secluded, wooded area near his home. He carried a small, leather-bound notebook. He would sit for hours, motionless, watching the ravens that frequented the area. Sometimes he'd murmur to them, a soft, almost melodic hum. Other times, he'd meticulously sketch in his notebook. He even had a small, custom-made feeding station, a wooden platform where he'd leave scraps of food. And yes, he collected the feathers, carefully picking them up, examining them, and placing them into a small, velvet pouch. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was mounting. The geographic proximity, the distinct behavior, the job that provided access and anonymity, and the chilling connection to the raven feathers. Corbin and Ramirez presented their findings to Captain Miller and Dr. Eris Thorne. "He fits the profile," Dr. Thorne confirmed, his expression grim. The social isolation, the obsession with specific behaviors, the perceived connection to animals, the meticulous nature of his movements. He's found a ritual that gives his life meaning, a twisted sense of purpose. The ravens, for him, symbolize freedom, observation, power, things he likely feels he lacks in his own life. The decision was made to execute a search warrant on Elias Thorne's residence. The planning was meticulous, every contingency considered. They couldn't afford a single misstep. This killer was too careful, too dangerous. The raid commenced in the pre-dawn hours, a heavy mist once again clinging to the streets. A SWAT team secured the perimeter while Corbin, Ramirez, and a tactical entry team breached the front door. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. Elias Thorne was found in his small bedroom, asleep, the leather-bound notebook clutched to his chest. He offered no resistance, his eyes wide and unblinking, betraying no fear, only a chilling, hollow acceptance. The search of the house was meticulous. The grandmother, frail and confused, was taken to a local hospital. In Elias's room, hidden beneath loose floorboards, they found a small, custom-made wooden box. Inside, carefully arranged on a bed of black velvet, were dozens of black raven feathers, each one pristine, each one a silent trophy. Next to the box, wrapped in oil-stained cloth, was the murder weapon. A single-edged, 5-inch hunting knife, surgically sharp, its blade pristine. Dr. Sharma's team later confirmed it matched the wound patterns on all 4 victims. And then the notebook. Corbin took the notebook to the station, his hands trembling slightly. It was Elias Thorne's journal, his meticulous record of his descent into madness. The pages were filled with elegant, almost artistic script, interspersed with detailed, chilling sketches. Sketches of ravens, of moonlit landscapes, and, most disturbingly, of each of his victims, their faces drawn with an unsettling precision, the raven feather always present, placed delicately on their lips. He read Elias's words, his voice a low murmur, as Ramirez stood beside him, her face pale. Elias saw himself as an agent of cleansing, a silent observer who had been tasked with restoring balance to a world he perceived as decadent and corrupt. He felt an intense connection to ravens, believing them to be messengers, overlooked and misunderstood, much like himself. He believed society had discarded him, ignored him, stripped him of his worth. His victims, to him, represented the pillars of that society: knowledge, history, connection, healing that he felt were inherently flawed, hypocritical, or ultimately meaningless. They speak of understanding the cosmos, yet they cannot see the darkness within themselves. Elias had written about Evelyn Reed. They collect stories, but forget the silence of truth. For Martha Jenkins, they fill the void with frivolous noise, avoiding the profound loneliness of existence. For Tommy Albright, and for Dr. Adam Finch, they claim to heal, yet they cannot mend the deepest wounds, the ones inflicted by an uncaring world. The journal was a chilling testament to his warped logic, his profound narcissism, and his desperate need to be seen, to be powerful, through acts of ultimate control. The feather was not just a symbol of the ravens. It was a symbol of his own dark freedom, his ability to move unseen, to judge and to execute. The motive, as abstract as it was, finally became horrifyingly clear. Elias Thorne was not just a killer. He was a self-proclaimed prophet of darkness, a silent judge, executing his own perverted justice. The news of Elias Thorne's arrest ripped through Ravenwood like a storm. The relief was palpable, a collective sigh of a city that had held its breath for far too long. People emerged from their homes, cautiously at first, then with a renewed sense of hope. The empty parks slowly began to fill. The downtown streets buzzed with tentative life. The nocturne killer's reign of terror was over. But the scars remained. The trial of Elias Thorne was a national sensation. The defense argued insanity, presenting his journals as evidence of a deeply fractured mind. The prosecution, led by a formidable district attorney, presented a mountain of evidence: the murder weapon, the feathers, the chilling confessions in his journal, and the meticulous planning that defied a claim of total mental incapacity. Corbin and Ramirez testified, their voices steady as they recounted the horrific details of the investigation, the terror that had gripped their city. Dr. Eris Thorne provided expert testimony, explaining the nuances of Elias Thorne's psychopathy, his organized nature despite his delusions. Elias Thorne himself remained largely silent throughout the proceedings, his hollow eyes betraying no emotion. When the verdict was read guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder, he simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, as if, even in defeat, he had achieved his ultimate goal, to be seen, to be acknowledged, however infamously. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In the aftermath, Ravenwood slowly began to heal. The memorials for Evelyn Reed, Martha Jenkins, Tommy Albright, and Dr. Adam Finch were somber but filled with a new sense of community, a shared understanding of their collective loss. The city learned a hard lesson about the fragility of peace, the insidious nature of fear, and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most tranquil communities. Corbin found a different kind of peace. The nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but they became less frequent, less vivid. He still nursed his coffee in the early mornings, but the silence in his apartment no longer felt so heavy. He saw a therapist, finally confronting the grief for Sarah that he had buried under years of police work. He began to paint again, a hobby he had abandoned after Sarah's death, finding solace in the colors and textures. Ramirez, too, emerged stronger. Her relationship with her boyfriend, tested by fire, found new footing. She was promoted to lead detective, her sharp mind and unwavering dedication recognized. She carried the weight of the cases, but also the hard-won wisdom of experience. Ravenwood rebuilt not just its economy, but its spirit. The whispers of dread slowly faded, replaced by the murmur of recovery, the resilient hum of a city reclaiming its soul. The ravens still flew over Forest Park, their dark wings a familiar sight against the gray sky. But now, when people saw them, they remembered not just the terror, but the collective strength that had allowed Ravenwood to endure, to confront the darkness, and to emerge, scarred but unbroken, into the light. The Nocturne Killer had left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder that evil can take many forms, even the quiet, unassuming form of a man who talks to ravens. But Ravenwood had learned that even in the deepest shadows, the human spirit, with its capacity for connection, for healing, for knowledge, and for memory, will always find a way to shine. The nocturne had ended, and the city, though forever changed, had found its own resilient melody once more.